Pack your bags and get out. I want you gone before the board meeting ends." Rebecca Sterling stood in the marble foyer of her Greenwich mansion, 8 months pregnant, holding divorce papers that felt heavier than her swollen belly. Her husband, Marcus Webb, impeccably dressed in his tailored Armani suit, showed no emotion as he delivered the words that shattered her world. "Marcus, what are you talking about?" Rebecca's voice trembled as she gripped the ornate banister for support. "The baby is due in 4 weeks. We just finished the nursery yesterday." Her millionaire ex-husband-to-be straightened his platinum cufflinks, a gesture she once found charming, but now recognized as his tell when he was lying. "This marriage was a mistake, Rebecca. I need someone who can actually contribute to my success, not drag me down with emotional neediness." The cruelty of his words hit her like a physical blow. Rebecca had given up her promising marketing career 3 years ago to support Marcus's rise to CEO of Webb Industries. She had hosted countless dinner parties, charmed investors, and transformed herself into the perfect corporate wife. Now, with their son growing inside her, he was discarding her like yesterday's newspaper. "Is this about the divorce settlement?" Rebecca asked, her mind racing through practical concerns while her heart shattered. "We can work something out. I don't need much." Marcus laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. Settlement? Rebecca, you signed a prenup. You get nothing except what I choose to give you out of the goodness of my heart." The prenuptial agreement. She remembered signing it during their whirlwind engagement, trusting Marcus completely when he said it was just a formality to protect both of them. She had been so in love, so naive, believing their marriage would last forever. Where am I supposed to go? The question escaped before she could stop it, revealing the depth of her desperation. She had no family, no close friends outside of Marcus's social circle, and no income of her own. "That's not my problem anymore." Marcus checked his Rolex, the same watch she had given him for their first anniversary. "I have a meeting with potential investors in an hour. Something about a pharmaceutical contract that could be worth millions." As if summoned by their conversation, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message. Rebecca caught a glimpse of the name on the screen. Vanessa Brooks, his 26-year-old assistant. Marcus's face softened in a way it hadn't when looking at Rebecca in months. "Our dinner reservation is confirmed for 8, he read aloud, clearly intending for Rebecca to hear. "The penthouse suite at the Ritz is ready." The betrayal hit Rebecca like a tsunami. "You're already with someone else." "Vanessa understands what it takes to build an empire," Marcus said, his voice taking on the passionate tone he once used when talking about their future together. "She supports my ambitions instead of complaining about feeling lonely or neglected." Rebecca's hands instinctively moved to her belly, protecting the child who would grow up knowing his father had abandoned him before birth. The stress of the confrontation, combined with the weight of her pregnancy, made her dizzy. "I need to sit down," she whispered. "Make it quick. The movers will be here in 2 hours to pack your things." Movers. He had already arranged for movers. This wasn't a spontaneous decision born from anger. It was a calculated plan executed with the same precision Marcus applied to his business deals. Rebecca sank onto the velvet settee where she had spent countless evenings, reading pregnancy books and dreaming about their son's future. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was wearing the $20,000 diamond necklace Marcus had given her last month, calling her his queen as he fastened it around her neck. "I loved you," she said quietly, the past tense hanging in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. "Love doesn't build fortunes, Rebecca. Smart partnerships do." As Marcus turned to leave, Rebecca felt a sharp pain in her lower back, followed by a warm wetness between her legs. Her water had broken. "Marcus," she called out, panic rising in her voice. "Something's wrong." He paused at the doorway but didn't turn around. "Call a cab to take you to the hospital. I can't be late for this meeting." The sound of his Italian leather shoes clicking against the marble floor echoed through the foyer as he left her alone, 8 months pregnant and in the early stages of labor, with nowhere to go and no one to call. Rebecca pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed the only number she could think of. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, her obstetrician. As she waited for the call to connect, another contraction gripped her, and she realized that this nightmare was just beginning. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she watched Marcus's black Tesla pull out of their circular driveway for the last time. In the passenger seat sat a petite blonde woman who looked nothing like Rebecca. Vanessa Brooks had already claimed her place in Marcus's life and car. The house that had been her sanctuary for 3 years suddenly felt like a mausoleum of broken dreams. Every carefully chosen piece of furniture, every family photo that would never include their son, every room where she had planned their future together now mocked her naivety. Rebecca forced herself to stand, gripping her belly as another contraction began. She had been betrayed by the man she loved, left homeless while pregnant, and facing an uncertain future. But as she felt her son moving inside her, she made a silent promise. She would survive this, and she would make sure her child never experienced the kind of narcissistic abuse she had endured. She just had to figure out how. The budget motel near Bradley International Airport smelled of industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. Rebecca sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, her Louis Vuitton luggage looking absurdly out of place against the faded floral wallpaper. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was wearing designer maternity clothes while staying in a place that charged by the hour. Her contractions had become more regular during the 30-minute drive from Greenwich, but she tried to convince herself it was false labor. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had warned her that stress could trigger premature contractions, and being abandoned by her millionaire ex-husband certainly qualified as stressful. Rebecca's phone rang, displaying Dr. Mitchell's number. "Rebecca, how are you feeling? You sounded panicked when you called." "I'm at the roadside inn on Route 9, Rebecca said, trying to keep the shame out of her voice. "My contractions are about 10 minutes apart, but they're not very strong." "The roadside inn? Rebecca, what happened? Where's Marcus?" The concern in Dr. Mitchell's voice almost broke Rebecca's fragile composure. In the sterile medical world where emotions were often pushed aside, Dr. Mitchell had always treated Rebecca with genuine warmth. She was the closest thing Rebecca had to a mother figure, which made the conversation even harder. "He filed for divorce," Rebecca said simply. "Asked me to leave immediately. I didn't have anywhere else to go." The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that Rebecca wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Dr. Mitchell spoke, her voice tight with controlled anger. "That bastard kicked you out while you're 8 months pregnant? Rebecca, you need to come to the hospital right now. Those contractions could be the real thing, and even if they're not, you shouldn't be alone." "I can't afford the hospital bills," Rebecca admitted, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. "The prenup I signed gives me almost nothing, and Marcus closed our joint accounts before he told me about the divorce." "Don't worry about the bills. I'll handle everything. Just get in your car and drive to Hartford Hospital. I'll meet you in labor and delivery." 40 minutes later, Rebecca found herself in a private room overlooking the city skyline. Dr. Mitchell had indeed handled everything, ensuring Rebecca received the best care without questions about insurance or payment. As the fetal monitor showed her son's strong heartbeat, Rebecca felt a mixture of relief and terror about bringing a child into her current situation. "The contractions have slowed down," Dr. Mitchell said, reviewing the readout. "It looks like false labor brought on by stress. But Rebecca, we need to talk about your situation. You can't stay in that motel." "I don't have many options," Rebecca replied, adjusting her hospital gown. "I've been out of the workforce for 3 years. My resume has a giant hole in it, and no one's going to hire someone who's about to give birth." Dr. Mitchell pulled a chair closer to Rebecca's bed, settling in for a longer conversation. "I've seen this pattern before with wealthy men. They often time their divorces strategically to avoid child support complications. Tell me, has Marcus mentioned anything about hiding assets or transferring money?" Rebecca thought back to the phone call she had overheard that morning. "He mentioned something about a pharmaceutical contract worth millions. He seemed excited about it, like it was going to change everything for him." "Pharmaceutical contract?" Dr. Mitchell's eyebrows rose. "That's interesting. Marcus runs a tech company, doesn't he? What would he be doing with pharmaceuticals?" "I honestly don't know. For the past year, he's been secretive about his business dealings. He used to share everything with me, but lately he's been having meetings at the country club instead of the office and taking calls in his study with the door locked." Dr. Mitchell made notes on her tablet, her expression thoughtful. "Rebecca, I need to ask you something for your medical file, but it might also be important for other reasons. Do you know anything about your family medical history? Any genetic conditions I should be aware of for the baby?" Rebecca shook her head. I was adopted when I was 3 days old. My adoptive parents died in a car accident when I was 22, and they never had much information about my biological family. The adoption was handled through a private attorney, and the records were sealed. Have you ever tried to search for your biological parents? I thought about it when I got engaged to Marcus, but he said it didn't matter. He said our children would have his family's medical history, and that was enough. Rebecca's voice caught slightly. I guess it matters now, doesn't it? Dr. Mitchell squeezed Rebecca's hand. It might matter more than you know. Rebecca, I want you to consider staying with me tonight. I have a guest room, and you shouldn't be alone while you're having contractions. The offer of kindness nearly broke Rebecca's careful composure. I can't impose on you like that. You're not imposing. You're accepting help from someone who cares about you and your baby. As they talked, Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. I know you're hurting, but Marcus made his choice. Don't make this harder on everyone by causing drama. Some battles aren't worth fighting. A friend. Rebecca showed the message to Dr. Mitchell, who frowned deeply. That sounds like a threat disguised as advice. Rebecca, I think there's more going on here than just a simple affair. Before Rebecca could respond, her phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Marcus. She stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. Take it, Dr. Mitchell advised, but put it on speaker. I want to hear what he has to say. Rebecca accepted the call. Hello, Marcus. Rebecca, where are you? The movers said you weren't at the house. I'm at the hospital. I was having contractions. Is the baby okay? For a moment, his voice carried a note of genuine concern. The baby is fine. False labor from stress. Good. Listen, I need you to sign some additional paperwork. My attorney will messenger it to you tomorrow. What kind of paperwork? Just some clarifications to the divorce settlement. Nothing major. Dr. Mitchell shook her head vigorously and mouthed, Don't sign anything. I'll need to have an attorney review it first, Rebecca said. Rebecca, don't be difficult. You know I'll take care of you and the baby. I'm not a monster. You threw me out of our home while I'm 8 months pregnant, Marcus. That's pretty monstrous behavior. I gave you 3 years of the best life you've ever had. Designer clothes, luxury vacations, a house most people only dream of. Don't act like you're some victim here. Dr. Mitchell gestured for Rebecca to end the call, but Rebecca had one more question. Marcus, why now? Why are you doing this now? The pause stretched long enough that Rebecca wondered if he would answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold again. Because I found someone who actually deserves to be by my side when I become one of the most powerful men in Connecticut. Vanessa understands what it takes to build an empire. And what does it take, Marcus? Sacrifice. Something you never understood. The call ended, leaving Rebecca staring at her phone. Dr. Mitchell reached over and gently took the device from her hands. Rebecca, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Marcus is trying to manipulate you into signing away your rights and possibly your child's rights. The timing of this divorce, the secrecy around his business deals, the threats from unknown numbers, this all points to something bigger than a simple midlife crisis. What are you saying? I'm saying that you need to fight back, and the first step is finding out who you really are. Dr. Mitchell pulled out her own phone and began typing. I have a friend who specializes in adoption searches. If there's any information about your biological family to be found, she'll find it. As Rebecca watched Dr. Mitchell make arrangements for an investigation she couldn't afford, she felt a spark of something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Maybe she wasn't as powerless as Marcus wanted her to believe. Maybe it was time to stop playing the victim and start playing to win. Rebecca's key still worked in the front door of the Greenwich mansion, though she suspected that was an oversight Marcus would correct soon. She had returned to collect her personal items, particularly the photo albums and baby books her adoptive parents had kept. Dr. Mitchell had given her a list of documents to search for. Birth certificates, adoption papers, anything that might provide clues about her biological family. The house felt different in the afternoon light, empty and cold despite the expensive furnishings. Rebecca climbed the curved staircase to the master bedroom, each step requiring effort as her pregnancy advanced. She paused at the top of the stairs, hearing voices from their bedroom. I think the lavender walls are too feminine, a woman's voice said. Marcus prefers more sophisticated colors. Rebecca's heart pounded as she recognized the voice. Vanessa Brooks, Marcus's assistant. She had met Vanessa at several company functions over the past year, always noticing how the younger woman seemed to study her with calculating eyes. "The decorator can change anything you want," Marcus replied. "This is your home now." Your home now. The words hit Rebecca like a physical blow. They weren't just having an affair. Vanessa had already moved in. Rebecca crept closer to the bedroom door, which stood slightly ajar. Through the gap, she could see Vanessa Brooks wearing one of Rebecca's maternity dresses, a custom-made piece from a Madison Avenue boutique that had cost $3,000. But Vanessa wasn't pregnant. She had somehow altered the dress to fit her petite frame, cinching it with a belt to create a fashionable silhouette. "This closet is amazing," Vanessa said, running her hands over Rebecca's designer clothes. "She has excellent taste. I'll give her that." "Had," Marcus corrected. "Past tense." Rebecca watched in horror as Vanessa pulled out more of her clothes, holding them up to herself in the mirror. But what chilled Rebecca to the bone was the methodical way Vanessa moved through the closet, as if she had done this before, as if she knew exactly where everything was kept. "I've been practicing her handwriting," Vanessa said, pulling out a small notebook. "Look at this." She showed Marcus a page filled with Rebecca's signature, practiced over and over until it was nearly perfect. Below the signatures were copies of Rebecca's distinctive cursive handwriting, the loops and curves replicated with unsettling accuracy. "Why do you need to copy her handwriting?" Marcus asked. "Trust me, it will come in handy during the divorce proceedings. If any documents need Rebecca's signature and she's being difficult, we'll have options." Marcus laughed, the sound echoing in the bedroom that had once been Rebecca's sanctuary. "You think of everything. That's why you're perfect for this." Rebecca's breath caught as she realized the full scope of what she was witnessing. This wasn't just adultery, it was identity theft. Vanessa had been planning to replace her, not just in Marcus's bed, but in every aspect of her life. "I have something to show you," Vanessa said, opening the drawer of Rebecca's nightstand. She pulled out a small device that looked like a picture frame. "I've been recording everything for months." "Recording what?" "Your conversations with Rebecca, her daily routines, her phone calls. I needed to understand her completely to become her." Marcus took the device, examining it with interest. "This was in our bedroom?" "Hidden in that family photo on your dresser." Rebecca never noticed it because it looks exactly like a regular frame. Rebecca felt sick as she remembered all the private conversations she and Marcus had shared in their bedroom. Arguments about his increasing distance, intimate moments she thought were just between them, phone calls with Dr. Mitchell about her pregnancy concerns. Vanessa had been listening to everything. "The files I've compiled will make the divorce proceedings much easier," Vanessa continued. "I know her emotional triggers, her insecurities, her fears about the future. She'll be easy to manipulate. And the pharmaceutical contract? Harrison Sterling is meeting with you next week. I've done extensive research on his company and his personal preferences. Sterling Pharmaceutical has been looking for a technology partner to help streamline their research division. Your company is perfectly positioned to win that contract." Rebecca's heart stopped. Sterling. Her adoptive parents had chosen the name Sterling when they took her in, saying they wanted her to have a strong, memorable surname. Could it be a coincidence that Marcus was pursuing a contract with a company that shared her name? "How much is the Sterling deal worth?" Marcus asked. $50 million over 3 years, with potential for expansion. But Harrison Sterling is old-fashioned. He prefers working with family men, executives who have stable personal lives. That's why the timing of your divorce is critical." "You mean why I needed to get rid of Rebecca before the meeting?" "Exactly. Sterling will never know about your previous marriage. As far as he's concerned, you're a dedicated bachelor who's recently found love with his devoted assistant." Rebecca pressed her hand to her mouth to stifle a gasp. Marcus hadn't fallen out of love with her. He had discarded her because she was bad for business. Their 3-year marriage, her pregnancy, their son's future, all of it was secondary to a pharmaceutical contract. "There's something else," Vanessa said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I found out something interesting about Rebecca's background." "What kind of something?" "She's not as much of a nobody as she thinks. I did some digging into her adoption records." Marcus leaned forward, interested despite himself. "I thought those were sealed." They are, but I have contacts who can access sealed records for the right price. Rebecca's biological parents weren't just random teenagers who couldn't handle a pregnancy. Her father is significant. Haha, how significant? Let's just say that if Rebecca knew who she really was, she could cause us serious problems. Rebecca's mind raced. Who was her biological father? And why would his identity threaten Marcus and Vanessa's plans? Should I be worried? Marcus asked. Not as long as Rebecca remains ignorant about her true identity. The adoption was handled very carefully to keep the connection hidden. But if she ever starts investigating her background, then we make sure she doesn't have the resources or motivation to investigate. Rebecca backed away from the door, her heart pounding so hard she was afraid they would hear it. She needed to leave before they discovered her, but first she had to get something from the room. Her adoptive parents' papers were in the safe hidden behind the mirror in their walk-in closet. She waited until she heard Marcus and Vanessa move into the bathroom, then slipped into the bedroom. The safe was exactly where she had left it, concealed behind a false panel. Rebecca quickly entered the combination, her son's due date, and grabbed the manila folder containing her adoption documents. As she turned to leave, she froze. Vanessa Brooks stood in the doorway, no longer wearing Rebecca's maternity dress, but back in her own clothes, a fitted business suit that emphasized her confident posture. "Hello, Rebecca," Vanessa said, her voice calm and controlled. "I was wondering when you'd come back." "This is still my house until the divorce is final," Rebecca replied, clutching the adoption folder to her chest. "Actually, no. Marcus transferred the deed yesterday. This house belongs to Webb Industries now, and I'm the property manager." Rebecca felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Marcus had been planning this divorce for weeks, maybe months. Every legal detail had been arranged before he ever asked her to pack her bags. "Marcus!" Vanessa called out. Vanessa called. "Your ex-wife is here trespassing." Marcus appeared in the doorway, his face hard with annoyance. "Rebecca, I told you to stay away." "I came for my personal papers," Rebecca said, holding up the folder. "What papers?" "My adoption records, photos of my parents, things that belong to me." Vanessa stepped closer, her eyes focused on the folder. "May I see those?" "No," Rebecca said quickly, backing toward the bedroom door. "Rebecca," Marcus said, his voice taking on the reasonable tone he used during business negotiations. "We're not trying to be difficult, but Vanessa is right to be concerned about what documents you're taking. The divorce settlement specifies that I retain ownership of all household items acquired during the marriage. These are my adoption papers from before we met." "Then you won't mind if we verify that," Vanessa said, reaching for the folder. Rebecca jerked it away from her grasp. "Don't touch it." The movement was too quick for someone 8 months pregnant. Rebecca lost her balance and stumbled backward, catching herself on the doorframe. The folder fell open, scattering papers across the hardwood floor. Vanessa immediately knelt down and began gathering the documents, her eyes scanning each page before Rebecca could stop her. When Vanessa reached the birth certificate, her expression changed from casual interest to sharp attention. "Marcus," Vanessa said quietly, "you need to see this." She handed him the birth certificate, pointing to a specific line. Marcus read it, his face growing pale. "What does it say?" Rebecca demanded, still struggling to gather the scattered papers. Marcus looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. Fear. "Rebecca," he said slowly, "your biological father is Harrison Sterling." The room went silent, except for the sound of Rebecca's ragged breathing. Harrison Sterling, the man who was supposed to give Marcus a $50 million pharmaceutical contract, the man whose approval Marcus needed to build his empire. "That's impossible," Rebecca whispered. Vanessa stood up, still holding several of Rebecca's documents. "Actually, it explains a lot. The monthly payments you've been receiving that you never told Marcus about." Rebecca's head snapped up. "What monthly payments?" $5,000 deposited into an account under your maiden name every month since your wedding day. I found the bank statements when I was researching your background. I don't have any account receiving monthly payments." Marcus and Vanessa exchanged a look that made Rebecca's blood run cold. "Rebecca," Marcus said carefully, "Harrison Sterling has been watching over you your entire life. And if he finds out that I divorced his daughter while she was pregnant with his grandchild—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. Rebecca understood the implications. Marcus had destroyed his own future the moment he decided to discard her. But for the first time since this nightmare began, Rebecca felt a glimmer of power. She wasn't just some abandoned woman with no resources and no family. She was Harrison Sterling's daughter, and that changed everything. The 24-hour diner off Interstate 95 was nearly empty at 11 p.m., fluorescent lights humming over cracked vinyl booths and coffee-stained tables. Rebecca sat in the corner booth, her adoption papers spread across the formica surface like pieces of a puzzle she was finally ready to solve. The documents that had fallen from her folder revealed more than just her biological father's name. They contained addresses, dates, and most importantly, a lawyer's contact information from 30 years ago. Dr. Mitchell slid into the booth across from Rebecca, setting down 2 cups of coffee and a manila envelope. "I got here as fast as I could. Are you sure you're okay? You sounded shaken on the phone." "Harrison Sterling is my biological father," Rebecca said without preamble. "The same Harrison Sterling that Marcus is trying to get a $50 million pharmaceutical contract from." Dr. Mitchell's eyes widened. "That's quite a coincidence." "I don't think it's a coincidence at all. Vanessa Brooks has been investigating my background. She found out about monthly payments I've been receiving that I didn't even know about." Rebecca pulled out her laptop and logged into the email account she had created years ago, but rarely used. Sure enough, there were dozens of automated notifications from First National Bank about deposits to an account she had never opened. $5,000 every month for 3 years, Rebecca said, scrolling through the statements. "The payments started the day I married Marcus." Dr. Mitchell leaned forward, studying the screen. "Rebecca, that's almost $200,000. Even if you didn't know about it, legally that money belongs to you." "But why would Harrison Sterling be sending me money? And how did he know I was getting married?" Dr. Mitchell opened the envelope she had brought and pulled out a thick file. "I called in a favor with my friend who specializes in adoption searches. She was able to access some records that aren't typically available to the public." The file contained newspaper clippings, business documents, and most shocking of all, a series of photographs. Rebecca's hands trembled as she looked at pictures of herself throughout the years. Graduating from college, at her wedding to Marcus, pregnant, and leaving the hospital after a doctor's appointment. "He's been watching me," Rebecca whispered. "It looks like he's been protecting you," Dr. Mitchell corrected. "Look at the dates on these bank statements. The money wasn't just wedding gifts. He's been putting money aside for you since you turned 18. Rebecca found a business card tucked between the documents. Harrison Sterling, CEO and founder. Sterling Pharmaceutical. There was a handwritten note on the back. "For Rebecca, when she's ready to know the truth." "I need to call him," Rebecca said, reaching for her phone. "At 11 p.m.? Rebecca, think about this carefully. If you contact Harrison Sterling directly, you'll be revealing that you know about your connection to him. Are you prepared for the consequences?" Rebecca thought about Marcus's face when he realized who her father was. The fear in his eyes had been genuine. "What consequences could be worse than what I'm already facing?" "Well, for one thing, it means your divorce settlement could change dramatically. If Harrison Sterling acknowledges you as his daughter, you might be entitled to significant assets. That would give Marcus motivation to fight dirty. He's already fighting dirty. Vanessa Brooks has been recording my private conversations for months. They've been planning this divorce as a business strategy, not an emotional decision." Dr. Mitchell sipped her coffee, considering the implications. "There's something else you should know. I did some research on Sterling Pharmaceutical today. Harrison Sterling is 67 years old, never remarried after his first wife died, and has no acknowledged children. What does that mean?" "It means you might be his only heir." The weight of that possibility settled over Rebecca like a blanket. Her millionaire ex-husband had discarded her to pursue a contract with the pharmaceutical giant, not knowing that she was the pharmaceutical giant's daughter and possibly his only heir. "I'm calling him," Rebecca decided, dialing the number on the business card. The phone rang 3 times before a gravelly voice answered. "Harrison Sterling." "Mr. Sterling, this is Rebecca Sterling Webb. I believe you knew my biological mother." The silence stretched so long that Rebecca wondered if the call had dropped. When Harrison Sterling finally spoke, his voice was heavy with emotion. "Rebecca, I've been waiting 30 years for this phone call." "You've been waiting for me to call?" I've been hoping you would want to know about your family when you were ready. Where are you? Are you safe? The question surprised Rebecca. I'm safe, but I have some complicated circumstances in my life right now. Your divorce. Rebecca's breath caught. You know about my divorce. Rebecca, I've been watching over you since the day you were born. I know about Marcus Webb. I know about the pregnancy, and I know that he filed for divorce yesterday. Why didn't you contact me before now? Because I promised your mother I would let you choose your own path. But circumstances have changed. What circumstances? Your husband is trying to negotiate a contract with my company. He has no idea that his wife is my daughter. Wait. Rebecca closed her eyes, feeling the full irony of the situation. Mr. Sterling, I need to ask you something. Have you been sending me money? $5,000 a month since your 18th birthday. I set up a trust fund when you were born, but I wanted to make sure you had resources available if you ever needed them. I didn't know about the account. I had a feeling you didn't. Marcus Webb struck me as the type of man who would control his wife's finances. That's why I set up the account in your maiden name and had the statements sent to a separate address. Dr. Mitchell was taking notes, her medical training making her naturally organized even in personal situations. She wrote a question on her napkin and slid it across to Rebecca. Ask him about meeting in person. Mr. Sterling, would it be possible for us to meet? I have a lot of questions, and some things have happened that I think you should know about. Of course. Rebecca, would you be comfortable coming to my home tomorrow? I live in Fairfield, about an hour from Hartford. I'd like that very much. Good, I'll send a car for you. And Rebecca, yes? Bring whatever documents you have about your adoption. It's time you knew the whole truth about your family. After Rebecca ended the call, she sat staring at her phone, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. In the span of one phone call, her entire understanding of her identity had shifted. How do you feel? Dr. Mitchell asked gently. Terrified, Rebecca admitted, but also hopeful. For the first time since Marcus kicked me out, I feel like I might have options. You definitely have options. Rebecca, if Harrison Sterling acknowledges you as his daughter publicly, you'll have legal standing to fight Marcus's divorce terms. More importantly, you'll have resources to ensure your son has everything he needs. Rebecca placed her hands on her belly, feeling her son respond to her touch with a gentle kick. I need to be smart about this. Marcus and Vanessa are playing a game I don't understand yet, but they've made one crucial mistake. What's that? They underestimated me. They thought I was just some helpless woman with no family and no resources. But I'm not helpless anymore. Rebecca began gathering her documents, organizing them carefully in the folder. Dr. Mitchell, I need to ask you a favor. Anything. If something happens to me, if Marcus tries to claim custody of my son, or if Vanessa's threats escalate, I need someone who knows the truth. Someone who can make sure my son knows who his family really is. Rebecca, nothing is going to happen to you. You're not alone anymore. I know, but I learned today that people aren't always who they seem to be. I want to be prepared for whatever comes next. As they left the diner, Rebecca felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced since before her marriage. Marcus had thrown her away thinking she was powerless, but he had actually freed her to discover her real family. Tomorrow she would meet the father she had never known and learn the truth about her inheritance. Tonight, she would plan her strategy for taking back control of her life. Her millionaire ex-husband thought he had won by choosing his assistant's advice over his wife's love. But Rebecca Sterling was about to show him what it meant to underestimate a woman who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The game was just beginning, and this time, Rebecca intended to win. The Sterling estate in Fairfield looked like something from a movie about old money and established power. Rebecca sat in the back of the Mercedes sedan Harrison had sent for her, staring at the imposing gates topped with intricate metalwork spelling out Sterling in elegant script. The circular driveway was lined with ancient oak trees, their branches forming a natural cathedral that led to a colonial mansion with more windows than Rebecca could count. She had spent the morning researching Sterling Pharmaceutical online, learning that her biological father had built one of the most successful independent pharmaceutical companies in New England. Unlike the corporate giants that dominated the industry, Sterling Pharmaceutical focused on innovative treatments for rare diseases, often working pro bono with patients who couldn't afford their medications. The driver, a kind-faced man in his 60s, glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Mr. Sterling is waiting for you in his study, miss. He's been very excited about today." "Has he mentioned me before?" Rebecca asked, curiosity overcoming her nervousness. "Oh yes, miss. He has pictures of you throughout the house. He's very proud of what you've accomplished." Pictures of her throughout the house. Rebecca tried to process the idea that this man she had never met had been following her life so closely that he displayed her photograph in his private home. The front door opened before she could knock, revealing a distinguished man with silver hair and kind eyes that looked remarkably like her own. Harrison Sterling was tall and elegant, wearing a perfectly tailored sweater and wool slacks that suggested both wealth and approachability. "Rebecca," he said, his voice warm with emotion, "you look exactly like your mother." "Mr. Sterling, please call me Harrison, and please come in. We have 30 years to catch up on." The interior of the house was as impressive as the exterior, but it felt like a home rather than a museum. Family photographs covered the mantelpieces and side tables, and Rebecca was shocked to recognize herself in many of them. Pictures from her high school graduation, her college years, her wedding day. Somehow Harrison had obtained copies of the most important moments of her life. "I know this must be overwhelming," Harrison said, leading her into a wood-paneled study lined with medical textbooks and pharmaceutical journals. "But I want you to know that I never stopped thinking about you. Not for a single day." Rebecca settled into a leather chair that felt expensive and comfortable. "Why didn't you contact me sooner?" Harrison poured 2 cups of coffee from a silver service, his movements careful and deliberate. "Your mother made me promise that if anything happened to her, I would let you choose your own path. She didn't want you to feel obligated to a family you didn't know." "Tell me about her." Elizabeth was brilliant. She was a researcher at Yale, working on pediatric cancer treatments. We met when I was trying to develop my first pharmaceutical company, and she became my business partner as well as my wife. Harrison opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a leather album. "She died 3 days after you were born. Complications from the birth that the doctors couldn't prevent. It was 1994, and the medical technology we have now simply didn't exist then." Rebecca looked through the photographs of a woman who looked remarkably like her, but with Harrison's serious expression. Elizabeth Sterling had been beautiful in an intellectual way, her photos showing her in laboratory settings, at medical conferences, and in candid moments with Harrison. "Why was I placed for adoption? You could have raised me yourself. I was 37 years old, running a failing company, and devastated by your mother's death. I didn't think I could give you the stable family life you deserved. The Sterlings, your adoptive parents, were friends of Elizabeth's. They had been trying to have children for years, and Elizabeth had made me promise that if something happened to her, we would consider letting them raise you." Harrison's voice became heavy with regret. "It was the hardest decision I've ever made, but I thought it was best for you. I set up a trust fund and asked the Sterlings to give you their name as a way to honor your mother. But you've been watching me. I hired a private investigator to send me updates about your welfare. When you turned 18, I started the monthly payments as a way to ensure you always had financial security, even if you never knew where it came from." Rebecca thought about the account she had discovered, money that could have changed her relationship with Marcus if she had known about it. "The payments stopped getting to me. Marcus controlled all our finances." Harrison's expression darkened. "I suspected as much when I researched your husband. Rebecca, there are things about Marcus Webb that you need to know." "What things?" "He's been trying to negotiate a contract with Sterling Pharmaceutical for 8 months. But more importantly, he's been using insider information to manipulate stock prices and hide assets in offshore accounts." Rebecca felt her heart sink. "You mean he's been planning this divorce for 8 months?" "I believe so. My investigation shows that he opened several accounts in the Cayman Islands last year and has been gradually transferring money out of his company. He's preparing to claim poverty during your divorce proceedings while hiding millions in assets." The betrayal felt fresh and raw, even though Rebecca had already accepted that Marcus's love had been a lie. "How do you know all this?" "Because I've been investigating him as a potential business partner, and I don't like what I found. Marcus Webb is exactly the kind of person Elizabeth and I dedicated our lives to fighting against. Someone who puts profit over people and treats ethics as optional. Harrison stood up and walked to a wall safe hidden behind a painting. He pulled out a thick folder and set it on the desk between them. Rebecca, I need to ask you something important. Are you interested in learning about the pharmaceutical business? I don't know anything about pharmaceuticals, but you know about marketing, about building relationships, about understanding what people need. Those are the most important skills in this business. Rebecca opened the folder and found detailed information about Sterling Pharmaceuticals' operations, financial statements, and future plans. Why are you showing me this? Because you're my daughter, and this company will be yours someday. But more than that, you have talents that could help us expand our mission. Ew, what mission? Elizabeth and I started this company to develop medications for diseases that the big pharmaceutical companies ignore because they're not profitable enough. We've never wavered from that mission, even when it meant turning down lucrative contracts. Harrison sat back down, leaning forward earnestly. Rebecca, I'm offering you the chance to join the family business, not as charity for a daughter in distress, but as a legitimate partner who could help us reach more patients. The offer was overwhelming. 24 hours ago, Rebecca had been a homeless, pregnant woman with no resources and no family. Now she was being offered a position in a multi-million-dollar pharmaceutical company by a father she had never known. I'm 8 months pregnant, Rebecca said practically. I can't exactly jump into a new career right now. The timing is actually perfect. You have 4 months to learn the business before the baby arrives, and then you can work part-time while you adjust to motherhood. We believe in family-work balance here. Rebecca thought about Marcus's reaction when he learned her true identity. Harrison, there's something you should know about your contract negotiations with Marcus. What's that? He's been working with his assistant, Vanessa Brooks, to manipulate those negotiations. They've been researching your personal preferences and planning to deceive you about his personal life? Harrison nodded grimly. I had suspicions about Miss Brooks. She's been unusually knowledgeable about our company's internal operations. She's been conducting corporate espionage. I have evidence that she's been recording private conversations and stealing confidential information. Do you have proof? Rebecca thought about the hidden camera Vanessa had shown Marcus in the files she had compiled about Rebecca's personal life. I can get proof, but I'll need your help. What kind of help? I want to attend the contract meeting between you and Marcus. I want to see his face when he realizes that his wife is your daughter and his assistant has been lying to him. Harrison smiled for the first time since Rebecca had arrived, and she could see where she had inherited her own determined expression. Rebecca, I think you're going to fit in perfectly at Sterling Pharmaceutical. When do you want to start? As they discussed the details of her new position and her role in exposing Marcus's deception, Rebecca felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced. This wasn't just about revenge against her millionaire ex-husband or proving that his assistant's manipulations had backfired. This was about finally finding her real family and discovering that she had inherited not just money, but a mission to help people that aligned with her own values. Marcus had thrown her away thinking she was worthless, but he had actually freed her to claim her true inheritance. The Sterling legacy was about to gain its most motivated new member, and Rebecca intended to make sure Marcus Webb regretted every decision that had led him to betray the wrong woman. The Sterling Pharmaceutical boardroom occupied the entire top floor of a sleek glass building in downtown Hartford, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the Connecticut River. Rebecca sat in a high-backed leather chair at the polished mahogany conference table, wearing a navy blue maternity dress that Harrison had insisted on buying for her. For the first time in months, she felt powerful rather than pitied. Are you sure you're up for this? Harrison asked, adjusting his tie nervously. In the 3 days since their first meeting, he had transformed from a distant biological father into a protective parent who worried about her stress levels and asked about her doctor appointments. I've been preparing for this my entire marriage, Rebecca replied, reviewing the folder of evidence she had compiled. Marcus trained me to be the perfect corporate wife. He just never realized I was paying attention to everything he taught me about business negotiations. James Sterling, Rebecca's half-brother, entered the boardroom carrying a stack of legal documents. At 42, James had Harrison's height and serious demeanor, but his initial resentment toward Rebecca's sudden appearance had evolved into grudging respect for her strategic thinking. "The contracts are ready," James said, setting the papers on the table. "If Marcus signs these, he'll be giving us majority control of his technology patents in exchange for the pharmaceutical partnership." "Will he realize what he's signing?" Rebecca asked. "Not unless he reads every page carefully, which men like Marcus rarely do when they think they're getting everything they want," James replied with a slight smile. Harrison checked his watch. "They should be here any minute. Rebecca, are you certain you want to reveal your identity during the meeting? We could wait until after he signs the contracts." "No," Rebecca said firmly. "I want him to understand exactly what he threw away while he still has the chance to back out. I want him to make his choice with full knowledge of the consequences." The boardroom door opened, and Marcus Webb entered with his usual confident stride, followed by Vanessa Brooks. Marcus wore his most expensive suit, the one Rebecca had helped him choose for important presentations. Vanessa was dressed professionally but provocatively, her skirt just short enough to be distracting, and her blouse just tight enough to be memorable. Marcus's eyes swept the room, taking in Harrison and James before landing on Rebecca. His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, and finally pure panic. "Rebecca," he said, his voice cracking slightly, "what are you doing here?" "Hello, Marcus," Rebecca replied calmly. "I work here now." Vanessa Brooks stepped forward, her calculating gaze moving between Rebecca and Harrison. "Mr. Sterling, I believe there's been some misunderstanding. This woman is Marcus's ex-wife, and she's been making threats about disrupting his business relationships." "Actually," Harrison said, standing to address his guests, "there's no misunderstanding. Please have a seat. We have a lot to discuss." Marcus remained frozen near the doorway, but Vanessa guided him to the conference table with a firm hand on his elbow. Rebecca noticed that Vanessa seemed more composed than Marcus, as if she had prepared for this possibility. "Mr. Webb," Harrison began, "I believe you're here to discuss a partnership between your technology company and Sterling Pharmaceutical." "Yes, sir," Marcus managed, his usual smooth presentation style replaced by nervous energy. "We've prepared a comprehensive proposal that would benefit both our companies." "Excellent. But before we begin, I'd like to introduce you to Sterling Pharmaceutical's newest executive. This is Rebecca Sterling, our Vice President of Strategic Development." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at Rebecca as if she were a ghost, while Vanessa's professional mask slipped just enough to reveal her shock. "Sterling?" Marcus whispered. "That's right," Rebecca said, enjoying his confusion. "It turns out my biological father is Harrison Sterling, CEO and founder of the company you've been trying to impress for 8 months." Marcus turned to Vanessa, his voice rising with panic. "You said her father was nobody important. You said her background check showed no significant family connections." "I said her adoptive parents were middle class, with no notable wealth or influence," Vanessa replied carefully. "Her biological parentage was sealed information." "Information that you somehow accessed anyway," Rebecca said, pulling out a folder. "We know about your corporate espionage, Vanessa. The hidden cameras, the recorded conversations, the forged signatures. Did you really think we wouldn't figure out that you work for Meridian Pharmaceuticals?" Vanessa's composure cracked completely. "That's a serious accusation. I hope you have proof." James slid a manila envelope across the table. "Bank records showing payments from Meridian to an account under your real name, Vanessa Mitchell. Email communications between you and Meridian's CEO discussing Marcus's technology patents. And my personal favorite, photographs of you entering Meridian's headquarters 3 times in the past month." Marcus grabbed the envelope, scanning the documents with growing horror. "Vanessa, tell me this isn't true." "Marcus, you have to understand. I was protecting both of us. Meridian offered me a chance to ensure our future together." "Our future?" Marcus's voice was getting louder. "You've been selling my company's secrets to my biggest competitor?" Rebecca watched the confrontation with fascination. Marcus's betrayal of her had been calculated and cruel, but Vanessa's betrayal of him was purely mercenary. There was a certain poetic justice in watching him experience the same shock and disbelief she had felt. "Gentlemen, ladies," Harrison interjected diplomatically, Perhaps we should focus on the business at hand. Mr. Webb, are you still interested in partnering with Sterling Pharmaceutical? Marcus looked around the room wildly, as if searching for an escape route. Mr. Sterling, I had no idea Rebecca was your daughter. If I had known... You would have what? Rebecca asked coolly. Treated me better? Waited until after the baby was born to file for divorce? Used me to get closer to my father? Rebecca, please. I made mistakes, but we can work this out. The only thing we need to work out is our divorce settlement, Rebecca replied, which, given my new circumstances, will be significantly different from what you proposed. Harrison leaned back in his chair, studying Marcus with the expression of a scientist examining an interesting specimen. Mr. Webb, I'm curious about something. You've been trying to negotiate a partnership with my company for 8 months, correct? Yes, sir. And during that time, you were married to my daughter, who was supporting your career and helping you build your professional network. Yes, but I didn't know she was your daughter. That's not my question. My question is this. What kind of man discards a loyal wife when she's 8 months pregnant, regardless of who her father is? Marcus had no answer for that. He looked to Vanessa for support, but she was busy reviewing the evidence of her own betrayal. Here's what I think happened, Harrison continued. Miss Brooks convinced you that divorcing Rebecca would improve your chances of securing our partnership. She probably told you that I prefer working with unattached men or that a pregnant wife would be a distraction during negotiations. Vanessa's silence confirmed Harrison's theory. The irony, James added, is that our father has always preferred working with family men. Stable personal relationships suggest stable business practices. Rebecca felt a contraction beginning and placed her hand on her belly, trying to breathe through it discreetly. The stress of the confrontation was affecting her pregnancy, and she needed to end this meeting soon. Marcus, she said, her voice steady despite the physical discomfort, you have a choice to make. You can sign Harrison's partnership agreement, which will give Sterling Pharmaceutical controlling interest in your technology patents. Or you can walk away and face criminal charges for corporate espionage. What do you mean, criminal charges? Miss Brooks has been committing industrial espionage on behalf of Meridian Pharmaceuticals, James explained. As her accomplice, whether knowing or unknowing, you're liable for her actions. Marcus finally understood the full scope of his situation. He had betrayed his wife to pursue a business deal with her father, been manipulated by an assistant working for his competitor, and was now facing both financial ruin and potential criminal prosecution. If I sign the partnership agreement, then Sterling Pharmaceutical becomes your majority partner, and we handle the legal issues discreetly, Harrison replied. You'll still have a successful company, just not complete control of it. Rebecca felt another contraction, stronger this time. I hate to interrupt, she said, but I think I need to get to the hospital. The room erupted in activity. Harrison and James immediately focused on Rebecca's well-being, while Marcus stood helplessly by, unsure whether he was still her husband or already her ex. James, call Dr. Mitchell, Rebecca said, her breathing becoming more controlled. Tell her we're on our way. As they prepared to leave, Rebecca looked back at Marcus one last time. The partnership documents will be on your lawyer's desk tomorrow. You have 48 hours to decide. Vanessa Brooks had already slipped out of the room, probably to catch the first flight back to whatever life she had built on lies and manipulation. Rebecca, Marcus called out as she reached the doorway, I'm sorry. For everything. I know you are, Rebecca replied, but sorry doesn't change anything. You made your choice when you thought I was powerless. Now you get to live with the consequences. As Harrison's driver rushed them to the hospital, Rebecca felt a mix of satisfaction and anticipation. Her millionaire ex-husband had finally learned the price of his narcissistic abuse, and her son was about to be born into a family that would value and protect him. The power shift was complete, and Rebecca Sterling was ready for the next chapter of her life. Hartford Hospital's labor and delivery wing had become familiar territory over the past month. But this time, Rebecca wasn't experiencing false labor. The contractions were coming every 5 minutes, intense and purposeful, as her body prepared to bring her son into the world. Dr. Mitchell had met them at the emergency entrance, took one look at Rebecca's face, and immediately admitted her to a private room. How are you feeling about the timing? Dr. Mitchell asked as she checked Rebecca's progress. Going into labor right after confronting your ex-husband seems like your son has a flair for drama. He's a Sterling, Harrison said from his position by the window, where he had been pacing nervously for the past hour. We tend to have a sense of timing. Rebecca smiled despite the pain of another contraction. Having Harrison there felt surprisingly natural, as if he had been part of her life for years rather than days. He had called ahead to ensure she had the best private room available and had somehow arranged for a selection of gourmet meals to be delivered, even though Rebecca couldn't imagine eating anything. "Where's James?" Rebecca asked between contractions. "Dealing with the legal paperwork for Marcus's situation," Harrison replied. "He wanted to be here, but someone needs to make sure your ex-husband doesn't try to run before he signs those partnership documents." Dr. Mitchell frowned at Rebecca's chart. "Your blood pressure is a little elevated. That's not uncommon during labor, but combined with the stress you've been under lately, I want to monitor you closely. Is the baby okay?" The baby's heart rate is strong and steady. He seems eager to meet his family. As if summoned by their conversation, there was a commotion in the hallway outside Rebecca's room. She could hear Marcus's voice, loud and agitated, arguing with someone. "I have a right to see my son being born," Marcus was saying. "She's still my wife until the divorce is final." "Sir, you're not on the approved visitor list," a nurse replied firmly. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "I'm not leaving until I see Rebecca." Harrison's jaw tightened. "I'll handle this." "No," Rebecca said, surprising herself with her decisiveness. "Let him in. I want him to see what he's missing." Dr. Mitchell looked uncertain. "Rebecca, stress during labor can be dangerous for both you and the baby." "I'm not stressed anymore," Rebecca realized as she said. "I'm angry, and anger gives me strength." The door opened and Marcus entered hesitantly, still wearing his expensive suit but looking disheveled from arguing with hospital staff. His eyes immediately went to Rebecca on the hospital bed, then to Harrison sitting protectively beside her. "Rebecca, how are you?" "In labor," she replied dryly. "How do you think I am?" "I needed to see you, to try to explain." "There's nothing to explain, Marcus. You made your choices very clearly." Another contraction hit, and Rebecca gripped Harrison's hand instinctively. Marcus watched the interaction with something that might have been jealousy or regret. "That should be me," Marcus said quietly. "No," Rebecca replied when the contraction ended. "It shouldn't. You forfeited that right when you chose Vanessa Brooks over your family. I was manipulated. She made me believe that divorcing you was the only way to secure our future." Harrison spoke for the first time since Marcus entered the room. "Mr. Webb, manipulation only works on people who want to be manipulated. If you had valued your marriage, you wouldn't have been susceptible to outside influence. You don't understand the pressure I was under. Building a company, maintaining our lifestyle, trying to provide for our future." "I understand perfectly," Harrison replied. "I built my own company while dealing with the death of my wife and the decision to place my daughter for adoption. The difference is that I never forgot my responsibilities to the people I loved." Dr. Mitchell checked the fetal monitor and frowned. "Rebecca, the baby's heart rate is showing some irregularities. I think we need to prepare for a C-section." The room immediately focused on medical concerns rather than family drama. Rebecca felt a spike of fear, not for herself, but for her son. After everything they had been through together, she couldn't bear the thought of losing him now. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked. "The irregularities aren't severe, but I don't want to take any chances. We can have you in surgery within 15 minutes. As the medical team prepared Rebecca for surgery, Marcus stepped forward awkwardly. "Rebecca, I know I don't have the right to ask, but could I wait here until we know the baby is safe?" Rebecca looked at him for a long moment, seeing perhaps for the first time the man she had fallen in love with years ago underneath the selfish stranger he had become. "You can wait in the family lounge with everyone else who's not actually family." "Rebecca, Marcus, you're about to lose your company, your freedom, and your wife. The least you can do is let me have surgery without having to worry about your feelings." Harrison squeezed Rebecca's hand as they wheeled her toward the operating room. "We'll be right here when you wake up." "Both of you? James is on his way. You're going to wake up to a room full of family." The last thing Rebecca saw before the anesthesia took effect was Harrison's worried face and Marcus standing alone by the window, finally understanding what he had thrown away. When Rebecca woke up 3 hours later, the first sound she heard was a baby crying, strong, healthy, and indignant. Dr. Mitchell appeared beside her bed, smiling broadly. Congratulations, Rebecca. You have a beautiful, healthy son. 8 pounds, 2 ounces, and very vocal about his opinions. Can I see him? Of course. A nurse brought over a tiny bundle wrapped in blue blankets, and Rebecca felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't thought possible. Her son had her dark hair and Harrison's serious expression, but his mouth was definitely his own, currently open in protest at the bright lights and unfamiliar sounds. He's perfect, she whispered. He is indeed, Harrison said from the doorway, his voice thick with emotion. May I meet my grandson? Rebecca looked up to see Harrison and James standing together, both men looking surprisingly nervous for such powerful executives. Come meet Michael Harrison Sterling. You're giving him my name? Harrison asked, his eyes filling with tears. He should know who his real family is from the beginning. James stepped forward, studying the baby with the analytical expression that seemed to run in the Sterling family. He looks like you did in the baby pictures from your adoption file. You kept baby pictures of me? Dad kept everything, James said with a smile. Photos, report cards, newspaper clippings from your college graduation. We have 30 years of your life documented. As they talked, Marcus appeared in the doorway, holding a massive bouquet of flowers that looked expensive and impersonal. He stood there uncertainly, as if unsure whether he was welcome. Hello, Marcus, Rebecca said calmly. Come meet your son. Marcus approached the bed cautiously, his eyes fixed on the baby. When he saw Michael's face, his expression crumbled. He's beautiful, Rebecca. He looks like you. Actually, he looks like a Sterling, James said with subtle emphasis. Marcus understood the implication. This child would grow up knowing his grandfather was one of the most powerful men in pharmaceuticals. His uncle was a successful businessman, and his mother was an executive in her own right. The poverty and powerlessness Marcus had tried to condemn them to would never be their reality. Rebecca, Marcus said quietly, I've signed the partnership agreement. I know, James texted me from the operating room. I want you to know that I never meant for things to end this way. Rebecca looked at her millionaire ex-husband, soon to be her regular ex-husband, since Sterling Pharmaceutical now controlled his company, and felt nothing but pity. Marcus, you meant for things to end exactly this way. You just didn't expect consequences. Dr. Mitchell entered the room with paperwork. Rebecca, I need to complete the birth certificate. What name are you putting down for the father? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus looked hopeful and terrified at the same time. Michael Harrison Sterling, Rebecca said firmly. Father unknown. Rebecca, you can't do that. I'm his biological father. Biology and fatherhood aren't the same thing, Harrison said quietly. If you want legal recognition as this child's father, you'll need to establish that through the courts during your divorce proceedings. The implication was clear. Marcus would have to fight for parental rights, and given his current legal troubles and Rebecca's newfound family resources, it would be an expensive and likely unsuccessful battle. This isn't over, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. Yes, it is, Rebecca replied, holding her son closer. You made your choice when you thought I was powerless. Now I'm making mine. As Marcus left the hospital room, Rebecca felt a chapter of her life closing definitively. Her son stirred in her arms, opening dark eyes that seemed to look directly at her with the serious expression she was learning to recognize as a Sterling family trait. Welcome to the family, Michael, Harrison said softly. You're going to love being a Sterling. Rebecca couldn't have agreed more. After years of narcissistic abuse and financial manipulation, she had finally found her real family and her true home. And this time, no one would ever make her feel powerless again. 6 weeks after Michael's birth, Rebecca felt strong enough to handle the final confrontation with Marcus and Vanessa Brooks. The conference room at Sterling Pharmaceutical looked the same as it had during their first meeting, but everything else had changed. Rebecca now sat at the head of the table as an executive rather than a visitor, wearing a tailored business suit that accommodated her post-pregnancy figure and projected the authority she had earned. Marcus entered the room flanked by 2 lawyers, his usual confidence replaced by the nervous energy of a man who knew he was outmatched. Behind him came Vanessa Brooks, who had apparently decided that running away wasn't an option after all. She looked polished and professional, but Rebecca could see the calculation in her eyes as she assessed the room for advantages. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting," Rebecca said formally. "I thought it would be beneficial for us to resolve all outstanding issues before the divorce proceedings begin." "Rebecca," Marcus began, "I hope we can approach this reasonably. We both want what's best for Michael." "Do we?" Rebecca asked, opening a folder in front of her. "Because based on your actions over the past 2 months, I'm not convinced you know what's best for anyone." James Sterling entered the room with Harrison, both men carrying briefcases that suggested serious legal business. Vanessa's eyes tracked their movements with the focus of someone expecting an attack. "Mr. Webb, Miss Brooks," Harrison said, taking his seat, "I believe you've both had time to review the evidence we've compiled regarding your activities." One of Marcus's lawyers, a thin man with nervous energy, spoke up. "Mr. Sterling, we maintain that any corporate espionage was conducted without Mr. Webb's knowledge or consent." "That's an interesting defense," James replied, pulling out a thick file. "Unfortunately, we have email records showing that Mr. Webb approved several information transfers to Meridian Pharmaceuticals through Miss Brooks." "Those emails could be fabricated," Vanessa said, speaking for the first time. "They could be," Rebecca agreed. "But the bank records showing payments from Meridian to your personal account are quite real, as are the recordings you made of my private conversations." Rebecca had spent weeks working with Sterling Pharmaceuticals' legal team to build an airtight case. The evidence against Vanessa was overwhelming, and Marcus's involvement was clear enough to make him liable as an accomplice. "What exactly are you proposing?" Marcus's lawyer asked. "Full restitution for the stolen intellectual property, public acknowledgement of the corporate espionage, and criminal prosecution for both corporate espionage and identity theft," Harrison replied. "Identity theft?" Marcus looked confused. Rebecca slid a photograph across the table, showing Vanessa wearing Rebecca's clothes and practicing her signature. "Miss Brooks systematically studied my personal habits, recorded my conversations, and forged my handwriting with the intent to assume my identity during the divorce proceedings." "Ha! That's ridiculous," Vanessa protested. "I never tried to assume anyone's identity." "Then explain the detailed files you compiled about my daily routines, my personal relationships, and my psychological profile," Rebecca said, producing more evidence. "Explain the forged signatures and the plan to use them to manipulate legal documents." Vanessa's professional mask was slipping. "I was protecting Marcus's interests during a difficult divorce." "You were committing felonies," James corrected. "Multiple felonies, with clear intent to defraud." Marcus looked at Vanessa with growing horror as he began to understand the full scope of her deception. "Vanessa, tell me you didn't actually forge Rebecca's signature." "Marcus, you have to understand. I was trying to protect our future together." "Our future?" Marcus's voice rose. "You've destroyed any chance I had at a future. My company's gone, my wife won't speak to me, and now I'm facing criminal charges because of your schemes." "Your company isn't gone," Rebecca corrected. "Sterling Pharmaceutical is your majority partner now. You'll still be the CEO, but you'll be accountable to people who have ethical standards." The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Marcus had tried to cheat Harrison Sterling out of a fair business deal, not knowing he was actually cheating his own father-in-law. "What about my son?" Marcus asked quietly. "What about him?" Rebecca replied. "I want visitation rights, partial custody. He's my child too." Rebecca considered this for a moment, thinking about Michael sleeping peacefully in the nursery at the Sterling estate, surrounded by grandparents and an uncle who loved him unconditionally. "Marcus, you filed for divorce when I was 8 months pregnant. You threw me out of our home when I was in early labor. You chose your assistant's advice over your family's welfare at every crucial moment. I made mistakes. You made choices," Rebecca corrected, "and now you get to live with the consequences of those choices." She pulled out another document and slid it across the table. "Supervised visitation, twice a month with a social worker present. All visits at a neutral location. No overnight stays until Michael is old enough to express his own preferences." Marcus's lawyers reviewed the document, their expressions suggesting it was more generous than they had expected. "This is very reasonable," one of them said quietly to Marcus. "I want more than that. He's my son." "Then you should have thought about that before you abandoned him," Harrison said bluntly. Rebecca is offering you more consideration than you deserve. Vanessa had been unusually quiet during the custody discussion, but now she leaned forward with renewed confidence. There's something you all should know. I'm pregnant. The room went silent. Marcus turned to stare at Vanessa with an expression of pure shock. You're what? I'm pregnant, Marcus, with your child. Rebecca felt a moment of nausea, not from jealousy, but from recognition of the manipulation tactic. When exactly did you become pregnant, Vanessa? 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago was exactly when the criminal investigation into corporate espionage became public knowledge, James observed. Interesting timing. What are you implying? Vanessa demanded. I'm implying that a pregnancy claim is a convenient way to try to establish yourself as part of Marcus's family unit and potentially gain sympathy during criminal proceedings, Rebecca said calmly. You can't prove that I'm lying. Actually, we can, Dr. Mitchell said, entering the conference room. Rebecca had asked her to attend as a medical expert. Blood tests, ultrasounds, medical records. Pregnancy is very easy to verify or disprove. Vanessa's confident expression faltered slightly. I don't have to submit to medical testing. No, but if you're claiming pregnancy as a mitigating factor in criminal proceedings, the court can order medical verification, James explained. Marcus was staring at Vanessa as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Are you actually pregnant, or is this another one of your manipulations? Marcus, I can't believe you don't trust me. Trust you? You've been lying to me for months. You destroyed my marriage, stole from my company, and committed crimes in my name. Why would I trust anything you say? The confrontation Rebecca had planned was turning into something more satisfying than she had imagined. Marcus was finally seeing Vanessa Brooks for what she really was, a manipulative opportunist who had used him to achieve her own goals. The pregnancy is irrelevant to the criminal charges, Harrison said firmly. Miss Brooks will face the consequences of her actions, regardless of her personal circumstances. And my company, Marcus asked, will continue to operate under Sterling Pharmaceutical's guidance, Rebecca replied. You'll remain as CEO, but all major decisions will require board approval. What about us? Marcus asked quietly, looking directly at Rebecca. There is no us, Marcus. There hasn't been an us since the moment you chose to believe Vanessa's lies over your wife's love. Rebecca, I know I hurt you, but we have a child together. Doesn't that mean anything? Rebecca looked at her millionaire ex-husband and felt nothing but pity. It means that Michael will grow up knowing that his mother never settled for narcissistic abuse, and his grandfather built an empire based on integrity rather than manipulation. I could fight this. Fight for custody. Fight for my company. You could try, James said mildly, but it would be expensive, time-consuming, and ultimately unsuccessful. The evidence against you is overwhelming, and your legal troubles are just beginning. Saru? Marcus looked around the room, finally understanding that he had no leverage left. Vanessa Brooks was facing serious criminal charges. His company was under Sterling control, and his access to his son was entirely dependent on Rebecca's generosity. What do I need to sign? He asked, his voice defeated. Rebecca felt a moment of satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with justice. Marcus had learned the hard way that actions have consequences and that treating people as disposable assets eventually backfires. The divorce settlement agreement, the custody arrangement, and the cooperation agreement for the criminal investigation, Rebecca said, indicating 3 stacks of documents. Your lawyers can review everything, but the terms are non-negotiable. As Marcus's lawyers huddled over the paperwork, Vanessa made one last desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. Marcus, you don't have to accept this. We can fight together. Start over somewhere else. Marcus looked at her with something approaching disgust. Vanessa, you've lied to me about everything. Our relationship, your job, your motivations, and now probably your pregnancy. Why would I want to start over with someone I can't trust? Because I love you. No, you don't. You love what you thought you could get from me, just like I thought I loved what I could get from Rebecca. But I was too stupid to realize that what I had with her was real. Rebecca felt a flicker of something that might have been forgiveness, but she pushed it aside. Understanding why Marcus had made his choices didn't excuse the damage he had caused. "The papers are in order," Marcus's lead attorney announced. "Mr. Webb, I recommend you sign them. The terms are actually quite generous considering the circumstances." Marcus took the pen with hands that trembled slightly. As he signed each document, Rebecca felt the weight of 3 years of marriage and manipulation finally lifting from her shoulders. "It's done," Marcus said, pushing the signed papers across the table. "Not quite," Harrison said. "Miss Brooks still needs to address her legal situation." Vanessa had been unusually quiet during Marcus's capitulation, but now she stood up with renewed defiance. "I'm not admitting to anything without speaking to my own attorney." "That's your right," James said calmly, "but the evidence speaks for itself. Corporate espionage, identity theft, fraud. The charges are going to be filed regardless of your cooperation. You can't prove I intended to harm anyone." "Actually, we can," Rebecca said, pulling out one final piece of evidence. "This is a recording of your conversation with Marcus, where you explicitly state your plan to manipulate him into divorcing me for business reasons." Abraham. The recording device was small and silver, the same one Vanessa had used to spy on Rebecca's private moments. Rebecca had found it in her former bedroom and discovered that it contained more than just surveillance. It had recorded Vanessa's own incriminating conversations. "You used my own methods against me," Vanessa said, her voice flat with defeat. "I learned from an expert manipulator," Rebecca replied. "The difference is that I'm using the evidence to seek justice, not to destroy innocent people." As the meeting concluded and the various parties prepared to leave, Marcus lingered near the conference table. "Rebecca, I know this doesn't change anything, but I want you to know that I really did love you. I just lost sight of what was important. I know you think you love me, Marcus, but love doesn't abandon someone when they're vulnerable. Love doesn't choose business opportunities over family. What you felt for me was possession, not love. What's the difference? Love would have made you want to protect Michael and me, not sacrifice us for a business deal." Marcus nodded slowly, finally understanding the distinction. "For what it's worth, I'm glad Michael will grow up in the Sterling family. You deserve better than I gave you." "Yes, I did," Rebecca agreed, "and now I have it." As Marcus left the conference room for the last time, Rebecca felt the final chapter of their relationship closing. There was sadness in it. 3 years of her life had been built on a foundation that turned out to be quicksand, but there was also tremendous relief. "How do you feel?" Harrison asked, putting a protective arm around his daughter's shoulders. "Free," Rebecca said simply. "For the first time in years, I feel completely free." James gathered the signed documents, organizing them with his characteristic precision. "Vanessa Brooks will be arrested tomorrow morning. Marcus will retain nominal control of his company, but will be subject to Sterling oversight for the next 5 years, and your divorce will be final in 60 days. And Michael? Michael will grow up knowing he's loved, protected, and valued," Harrison said firmly. "He'll never have to wonder where he belongs or whether his family will abandon him when things get difficult." As they prepared to leave the conference room, Rebecca looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city below. 6 months ago, she had been a powerless woman dependent on a man who saw her as expendable. Now she was an executive in a company dedicated to helping people, surrounded by family who valued her for who she was rather than what she could provide. Her millionaire ex-husband had taught her an important lesson about recognizing narcissistic abuse and financial manipulation. But more importantly, her real family had taught her about unconditional love and the power that comes from being valued for your true self. The confrontation was over, and Rebecca Sterling was ready to build the life she and her son deserved. 9 months after Michael's birth, Rebecca stood in the nursery of the Sterling estate, watching her son take his first tentative steps between the crib and the rocking chair that had belonged to his grandmother Elizabeth. The room was filled with morning sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked gardens where 4 generations of Sterlings had played and grown. "He's going to be walking everywhere within a week," Dr. Mitchell observed, settling into the comfortable chair she had claimed as her own during her frequent visits. In the months since Michael's birth, Sarah Mitchell had become much more than Rebecca's obstetrician. She had become the mother figure Rebecca had never had, and now served as Sterling Pharmaceutical's Director of Maternal Health Research. I'm not ready for that level of mobility, Rebecca admitted, scooping up Michael before he could attempt to climb the bookshelf. He already gets into everything he can reach. That's a sterling curiosity, Harrison said from the doorway, carrying a stack of financial reports and wearing the proud grandfather expression that had become his default setting. James was the same way. Your mother used to say that intellectual curiosity was the most dangerous trait a baby could inherit. Rebecca had grown to love these family moments, the casual interactions that spoke of belonging and permanence. After years of walking on eggshells around Marcus's moods and demands, the easy affection of the Sterling family still sometimes surprised her. Speaking of intellectual curiosity, James said, joining them in the nursery, the quarterly reports show that our maternal health division has exceeded all projections. Rebecca, your program for supporting pregnant women facing domestic abuse has helped over 200 families. The maternal health program had been Rebecca's first major initiative at Sterling Pharmaceutical, born from her own experience of being abandoned while pregnant. The program provided free prenatal care, legal support, and temporary housing for women in situations similar to her own. 200 families, Rebecca repeated, feeling the satisfaction that came from meaningful work. That's 200 children who won't grow up wondering if they're wanted. Dr. Mitchell pulled out her tablet to review the program statistics. The success rate is remarkable. 93% of the women who complete the program achieve financial independence within 2 years. More importantly, the domestic abuse recurrence rate is less than 5%. What makes the difference? Harrison asked, settling into his favorite chair to hold his grandson. Having real support instead of just temporary assistance, Rebecca explained. We don't just give them money and hope for the best. We provide job training, legal advocacy, and ongoing emotional support. Most importantly, we treat them like capable women who are facing a difficult situation, not like victims who need to be rescued. The approach had been controversial within some social service circles, but the results spoke for themselves. Women who graduated from the Sterling Maternal Health Program went on to build stable, independent lives for themselves and their children. There's something else, James said, pulling out a newspaper clipping. The Hartford Courant is running a feature story about the program next week. They want to interview you about the inspiration behind it. Rebecca felt a familiar flutter of anxiety about public attention. Do I have to mention Marcus specifically? You don't have to mention anything you're not comfortable discussing, Harrison assured her. But Rebecca, your story is powerful because it shows that anyone can face unexpected challenges, regardless of their previous circumstances. 9 months had given Rebecca perspective on her divorce and its aftermath. Marcus had indeed lost control of his company to Sterling Pharmaceutical, though he remained as CEO under close supervision. Vanessa Brooks had been convicted of corporate espionage and identity theft, receiving a 2-year prison sentence and substantial financial penalties. More satisfying than their legal consequences, however, was the knowledge that Rebecca had transformed her experience into something that helped other women avoid the powerlessness she had felt. There's a letter for you, Dr. Mitchell said, pulling an envelope from her purse. It was delivered to my office. Rebecca recognized the handwriting immediately. Marcus. She hadn't heard from him directly since the final divorce proceedings 6 months ago, though she knew from James that he had been attending supervised visitation sessions with Michael twice a month. Do you want to read it now? Harrison asked, noticing her hesitation. Might as well get it over with. The letter was shorter than she had expected. Rebecca, I know I have no right to contact you directly, but I wanted you to know that I've been attending therapy to understand why I made such destructive choices. Dr. Peterson says I have narcissistic personality traits that made me incapable of seeing you as a person rather than an extension of myself. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness or to try to change what happened between us. I'm writing because I want Michael to know, when he's old enough to understand, that his father recognizes the harm he caused and is working to become a better person. The supervised visits with Michael are the best part of my life now. He's obviously thriving with your family, and I can see how much he's loved. I'm grateful that you're raising him to be kind and confident, rather than teaching him to hate his father. I signed papers yesterday transferring my remaining ownership stake in Webb Industries to Sterling Pharmaceutical. It seemed like the right thing to do, given that your family has turned my company into something ethical and successful. I hope someday you'll be able to think of our marriage as a chapter that led you to where you belong, rather than 3 years that were completely wasted. Marcus Rebecca folded the letter carefully, processing her emotions. There was relief that Marcus seemed to be taking responsibility for his actions, and gratitude that he wasn't trying to insert himself back into her life. But mostly, there was just a sense of closure. "How do you feel?" Dr. Mitchell asked. "Sad for him," Rebecca said honestly, "and grateful that I'm not the person I was when I was married to him." "What kind of person were you?" Harrison asked gently. "Someone who thought I needed to earn love by being perfect. Someone who believed that if I just tried harder, I could make a selfish person become generous." Rebecca bounced Michael on her knee, marveling at how much her perspective had changed. "Now I know that love isn't something you earn. It's something you deserve just by being yourself." "That's a hard lesson to learn," James observed, "but an important one. I want Michael to grow up knowing he's valued for who he is, not for what he can provide to other people." Dr. Mitchell's tablet chimed with an appointment reminder. "Speaking of Michael, it's time for his checkup. Are you ready to discover whether he's inherited the sterling stubbornness along with the sterling curiosity?" As they prepared to leave for the pediatrician's office, Rebecca reflected on how different her life looked compared to a year ago. She had gone from being a dependent wife to an independent executive, from being isolated and manipulated to being surrounded by family who supported her ambitions. Most importantly, she had learned to recognize the difference between love and control, between partnership and possession. Her marriage to Marcus had taught her what she would never accept again, while her relationship with the Sterling family had shown her what real love looked like. "Rebecca," Harrison said as they walked to the car, "I have something to tell you." "What?" "The board of directors voted yesterday to name you president of the Maternal Health Division. It's not just a program anymore. It's going to be a separate division of Sterling Pharmaceutical with its own budget and staff." Rebecca stopped walking. Michael balanced on her hip. "You're serious?" "Completely serious. You've proven that you can build something meaningful from scratch. The board wants to expand the program nationally." "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," James encouraged. "Say yes to building something that will help thousands of families. Say yes to using your experience to create positive change." Rebecca looked at her son, who was reaching for the car keys with determined focus, and thought about all the women who were facing the same impossible choices she had faced a year ago. "Yes," she said firmly. "Absolutely yes." As they drove to the pediatrician's office, Rebecca felt the deep satisfaction that comes from turning pain into purpose. Her millionaire ex-husband had tried to discard her when she became inconvenient, but he had actually freed her to discover her true calling. She was no longer Rebecca Webb, the abandoned wife who had nowhere to turn. She was Rebecca Sterling, executive, advocate, and most importantly, a woman who would never again mistake control for love or possession for partnership. The future stretched ahead of her, full of possibilities she was finally strong enough to embrace. 2 years after Marcus had demanded she pack her bags and leave, Rebecca Sterling stood in the same marble foyer where her old life had ended and her new life had begun. But this time, she wasn't the heartbroken, pregnant woman clutching divorce papers. She was the president of Sterling Pharmaceutical's Maternal Health Division, surrounded by family and watching her son take confident steps across the floor where she had once stood, powerless and alone. The Sterling estate had become more than just a home. It was the headquarters for a movement that had grown beyond Rebecca's wildest dreams. The Maternal Health Division, now operated in 12 states, had helped over 1,000 families achieve financial independence and had become a model for other organizations working to support women escaping narcissistic abuse and domestic violence. "Mama, look!" Michael called out, proudly walking from the living room to the foyer without holding on to anything. At 15 months, he had his grandfather's determined expression and his mother's stubborn streak, combined with an infectious joy that lit up every room he entered. "I see you, sweetheart," Rebecca said, kneeling down to catch him in her arms. "You're getting so big and strong." "He's definitely a Sterling," James observed, entering the foyer with a briefcase and the satisfied expression of a man who had just closed a major business deal. "I just got off the phone with the California Department of Health. They want to implement our maternal health program statewide. California? Rebecca felt a familiar thrill at the prospect of expanding their reach. That would mean helping thousands more families. Tens of thousands, actually. The preliminary estimates suggest we could serve 20,000 women in the first year alone. Dr. Mitchell emerged from the kitchen carrying a cup of coffee and wearing the comfortable clothes that had become her uniform for weekend visits to the Sterling estate. In the 2 years since Michael's birth, she had become family in all but name, filling the maternal role that Rebecca had missed for most of her life. 20,000 women who won't have to choose between staying in abusive relationships and facing homelessness while pregnant, Dr. Mitchell said, settling into her favorite chair. Rebecca, do you realize what you've accomplished? We've accomplished, Rebecca corrected. None of this would have been possible without family support and the resources Harrison provided. Harrison appeared in the doorway, carrying the newspaper and wearing the proud expression he had adopted whenever anyone mentioned Rebecca's professional achievements. The Hartford Courant front page story about your work came out beautifully. Listen to this. Rebecca Sterling has transformed personal trauma into a national movement, proving that the most effective advocates are often those who have experienced the problems they're trying to solve. They quoted you correctly, James added with a grin. Sometimes the worst betrayal leads to the greatest discovery. I thought I lost everything, but I found my real family. Rebecca remembered saying those words during the newspaper interview, and they were even more true now than when she had first spoken them. Marcus's betrayal had been devastating at the time, but it had ultimately led her to discover her biological father, her true calling, and her own strength. Speaking of family, Harrison said, pulling out an official-looking document, I have some news that might interest everyone. What kind of news? Rebecca asked, instinctively suspicious of surprises after everything she had been through. Legal news. Marcus Webb's parental rights termination petition was approved yesterday. Rebecca felt her breath catch. He's voluntarily giving up his rights to Michael? Completely. He's also transferring his remaining financial obligations to a trust fund that will pay for Michael's education and future needs. According to his lawyer, Marcus wants to ensure that Michael has every advantage, even if he can't be part of his daily life. The decision wasn't entirely surprising. Marcus's supervised visits with Michael had become increasingly awkward as the toddler clearly preferred his grandfather and uncle to the stranger, who appeared twice a month with expensive toys and nervous energy. How do you feel about that? Dr. Mitchell asked gently. Relieved, Rebecca admitted, and grateful that Marcus finally recognized what was best for Michael instead of what he wanted for himself. There's more, Harrison continued. Marcus has also requested that we not tell Michael about his biological father until he's old enough to understand the full situation. He wants Michael to grow up feeling completely secure in his family without worrying about divided loyalties. Rebecca considered this unexpected display of maturity from her millionaire ex-husband. That's probably wise. Michael will have questions eventually, but for now he just needs to know he's loved and wanted. Which brings me to another piece of news, James said with barely contained excitement. I've been working with our lawyers on something special. He pulled out another set of documents and presented them to Rebecca with a flourish. Official adoption papers. If you agree, I'd like to legally adopt Michael as my son. Rebecca stared at the papers, overwhelmed by the generosity and love behind the gesture. James, you don't have to do that. I want to do it. Michael already calls me Uncle James, and he's already a Sterling in every way that matters. This would just make it official. What about your own family plans? What if you get married and have children of your own? Then Michael will be their big brother, James said simply. Rebecca, family isn't about blood. It's about commitment. Michael is already my family, and I want him to know that's never going to change. Harrison pulled out a handkerchief and wiped his eyes, not bothering to hide his emotional response to his son's declaration. Elizabeth would have loved seeing our family grow this way. She did love it, Rebecca said quietly, looking at the portrait of her biological mother that Harrison had hung in the foyer. I think she's been watching over all of us. Dr. Mitchell stood up and raised her coffee cup in an impromptu toast. To Elizabeth Sterling, who gave us Rebecca. To Harrison Sterling, who never stopped believing in family. To James Sterling, who understands that love makes a family. And to Rebecca Sterling, who proved that strength comes from knowing your worth. And to Michael Sterling, Rebecca added, lifting her son so he could participate in the toast, who will grow up knowing he's cherished, protected, and valued just for being himself. As they celebrated the legal formalization of bonds that had already formed naturally, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 3 years ago, she'd been a naive woman who thought love meant sacrificing herself for someone else's ambitions. Now she was a confident woman who understood that real love meant supporting each other's growth and dreams. The maternal health program had taught her that her experience wasn't unique. Thousands of women face similar choices between financial security and emotional survival. But her story was unique in its resolution. Instead of just escaping narcissistic abuse, she had transformed her experience into a mission that helped other women recognize their own worth. "There's one more thing," Harrison said, looking slightly nervous. "I've been talking to the board about succession planning for Sterling Pharmaceutical." "Dad, you're only 69, James protested. "You have years left before you need to think about retirement." "I'm not talking about immediate retirement. I'm talking about preparing for the future." Harrison looked directly at Rebecca. "I'd like to propose that we restructure the company with Rebecca as president and CEO, James as chief operating officer, and myself as chairman of the board." Rebecca felt the room spinning slightly. "Harrison, I've only been in the pharmaceutical business for 2 years. And in that time, you've built the most successful new division in the company's history. You understand the business, you share our values, and most importantly, you understand that our mission is to help people, not just make money." "What do you think?" Rebecca asked James, worried about his reaction to being passed over for the top position. "I think it's perfect," James said without hesitation. "You're the visionary, Rebecca. I'm good at operations and implementation, but you're the one who sees possibilities that the rest of us miss." Rebecca looked around the room at the family who had embraced her completely, at the son who would grow up secure in their love, and at the life she had built from the ashes of her marriage. 2 years ago, she had been abandoned by a man who saw her as expendable. Now she was being offered leadership of a company dedicated to healing and helping others. "I accept," she said firmly, "but only if we expand our mission to include education about recognizing and escaping narcissistic relationships. I want to prevent other women from going through what I experienced." "Done," Harrison said immediately. "We'll create an educational foundation as part of the maternal health division." As the family discussion continued and plans took shape for the company's future, Rebecca felt Michael fall asleep in her arms, completely secure in the knowledge that he was safe and loved. She thought about the letter Marcus had sent, expressing gratitude that Michael was being raised with kindness rather than bitterness. Rebecca had chosen kindness not because Marcus deserved it, but because Michael deserved to grow up without the poison of hatred. She had chosen forgiveness not to excuse Marcus's behavior, but to free herself from carrying the weight of his choices. Most importantly, she had chosen to see her abandonment as liberation rather than rejection. Marcus had thrown her away thinking she was worthless, but he had actually freed her to discover her true value. The marble foyer, where her old life had ended, was now the center of a home filled with laughter, love, and purpose. The woman who had once stood there heartbroken and homeless was now surrounded by family and preparing to lead a company that would help thousands of other women discover their own strength. "Mama," Michael murmured sleepily. "Home." "Yes, sweetheart," Rebecca whispered, kissing the top of his head. "We're home." And for the first time in her life, Rebecca Sterling knew with absolute certainty that she would never be homeless or powerless again. She had found her real family, her true calling, in her authentic self. The woman who had been discarded by her millionaire ex-husband had become someone infinitely more valuable, a woman who knew her own worth and used her strength to lift others. The Sterling legacy would continue for generations, built not just on pharmaceutical success, but on the understanding that real wealth comes from knowing you are loved, valued, and capable of creating positive change in the world. Sometimes the worst betrayal does lead to the greatest discovery. Rebecca had lost a marriage built on lies and found a family built on love. She had lost financial dependence and found financial independence. Most importantly, she had lost the illusion that she needed someone else's approval to be worthy of love and respect. The circle was complete, but the story was just beginning. Rebecca Sterling was ready for whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead, secure in the knowledge that she would never again mistake possession for love or control for partnership. Her son would grow up watching his mother lead with both strength and compassion, learning that real power comes from lifting others up rather than tearing them down. And perhaps most importantly, he would learn that family is defined not by blood or obligation, but by love, loyalty, and the commitment to stand together through whatever storms may come. In the marble foyer where her nightmare had begun, Rebecca Sterling stood surrounded by the life she had built from courage, determination, and the unwavering support of a family who had been waiting 30 years to welcome her home.